This video is sponsored by HelloFresh, the delivery service that brings fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes right to your door. HelloFresh takes the stress out of meal planning by providing pre-planned meals with a variety of delicious, affordable, and healthy meals to choose from. Customize your choices by swapping or adding proteins, or choose calorie-smart or carb-smart options. Cut down on time with quick and easy recipes, or add snacks, sides, and desserts from the HelloFresh market. HelloFresh sources its ingredients from the farm to your door within a week, ensuring you receive fresh ingredients and saving you time and money, since it's cheaper than grocery shopping or takeout. As longtime viewers know, I've had struggles with health problems in the past, and pre-planned meal services like HelloFresh are a great way for people with low energy or disabilities to eat well with less stress. You can try HelloFresh today, and by using my link in the description or my personal code, you'll receive a discount on your subscription and help support the channel. Thank you for watching, and thanks to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video. Wouldn't it be nice if life were simple? If everything could be packed into neat little boxes? If it was, it would certainly be easier to know how to feel. If things could be as simple as good and bad, evil and heroic. The reality is, we're all a little mixed up, a little muddled, a little of this and that. And when we try to simplify ourselves, to cut out the complex pieces that don't fit, we lose what makes us whole, what makes us really human. It's that message, the dangers of denying yourself the full human experience, and the consequences thereof, that are at the heart of Scum Villain's self-saving system. A Chinese web novel originally published online in 2014, Scum Villain is both a parody and scathing critique of the more mainstream fictional ideal, the popular stories, their tropes, their traditions, and the way they reduce characters to types and neat little boxes. Most of all, it's about how those reductions, for all that they might be satisfying to the average reader, don't really reflect what it is to be a person, and certainly wouldn't be satisfying for an actual person to live through. That's the fate that falls upon Scum Villain's main character, Shen Yuan, a young man from a well-off background with little responsibility and few connections in his life. We know little about him or the life he led back in the real world, modern-day China, other than he had siblings, a decently close family, and was well off enough he didn't have to worry about money. He was also an avid reader, who binge-read the web novel Proud Immortal Demon Way, the in-universe name for the novel, over the course of 20 consecutive days, reading over 300 million words, before becoming so angry over its conclusion that he died. Having successfully rage quit, Shen Yuan awakens to find himself in the world of the book he just read, a common trope referred to as transmigration. Like reincarnation, but it involves waking up in the body of a fictional character or in a fictional world that you originally experienced as a work of fiction. It's popular in Eastern media and a lot of anime, and it's gotten pretty common in danmei and bahei, or gay and lesbian Chinese works. Alongside Scum Villain, there's been How to Survive as a Villain in 2018, Where is Our Agreement to Be Each Other's Arch Rivals in 2019, and Mistakenly Saving the Villain in 2020, all of them danmei novels that came in the wake of Scum Villain. Each of them involves a modern man waking up in the body of a fictional character and having to navigate and survive their new world. A major element of these stories is the villain, the idea of a bad guy, an archetype who functions in a certain way in the world. Sometimes the main character is reborn as said villain, sometimes as a character close to said villain, but there's usually a focus on the fact that you are expected to behave a certain way, or else there will be consequences. It's a fundamental function of the world. This is a fiction, and it must have a villain. It's a simple idea that takes on complex depth when you pair it with transmigration and danmei themes. Take a man from modern China and place him in a world in which he must act a certain way or be damned, and then add queerness to that theme, and you reveal a powerful comparison that's at play, how personal identity is vilified and how people develop masks and acts to cover their true selves and survive. Back home, he had to be straight, or at least act that way, or suffer the consequences. Now he's literally the villain, and he has to be the bad guy. But of course, sticking to the role will have consequences too. A real damned if you do scenario. In the Scum villain story, Shen Yuan awakens in the body of Shen Qingqiu, the peak master of Qin Jing, a member of a cultivation sect, elements of a genre of Chinese fiction called wuxia. If you've never experienced it before, it's a genre that pulls from Taoism, Buddhism, and Chinese folklore to create a martial arts world where immortal masters deal with politics and disasters of all kinds. In Shansha, a further subgenre, there are actual magical elements like demons and non-human spirits. Scum Villain is something of a parody of most mainstream wuxia and Shansha web novels, and it becomes clear as Shen Yuan navigates the world and compares it to the book he read. When he awakens, he learns he has a system. This is like a computer program in the protagonist's head that gives him feedback and a set of rules he must follow, giving and taking points based on his behavior. This is also not an uncommon trope in transmigration novels. A system is often an explanation for how or why a character is reborn and forced to behave a certain way. Sometimes the origin of said system is given, sometimes it isn't. Shen Yuan's system is a more comedic type. So we have a young man named Shen Yuan reborn in the body of Shen Qingqiu, who in the original novel was the villain. He was the abusive master of the protagonist, Luo Binghe, the real hero of Proud Immortal Demon Way. After suffering years of abuse and later a terrible betrayal at his master's hands, Luo Binghe awakens to his full power and rises up to take revenge, killing anyone in his way, including Shen Qingqiu. Shen Yuan, the reborn character, knows all this. He just binge-read the whole novel in a 20-day fever dream. So he immediately wants to cower and bend the knee to the future king of the world, Luo Binghe, but he can't, because the system says it's against the rules. Instead, Shen Yuan, who I will now refer to as Shen Qingqiu, will have to navigate the role he's been forced into, trying to fit the master persona and fulfill the villain's role, while also not actually wanting to hurt the hero, Luo Binghe. Let's examine the rules and restrictions the system places on Shen Qingqiu. Firstly, it threatens to deport him if he fails his task in any way, essentially to send him back to his already dead body. Then it gives him specific guidelines as to how to behave. He's not allowed to be OOC, or out of character, just yet. He has to earn the right, a plot device that's used to really enforce for the reader that Shen Qingqiu is taking on a role. He's not acting as himself. Further, he has to gather points in order to survive in the world. There are different kinds of points which can be used and bartered for various plot points later in the story. There are satisfaction points and B points, short for badass points, both of which relate to the original story and how said story was written. It was meant to be satisfying for the reader, all the cheap fan service and simple-minded plots you could want. And it was meant to be badass, all the ass-kicking coolness and badassery of a hero who always wins, no matter what. None of it was narratively challenging or fulfilling, which is in itself an evil. But in this context, it's used as a framework to show how popular cultural ideas can crush individuality and hurt people. Because the original novel was once an in-depth work of fiction, it's revealed very late in the story that all the fan service and badassery was to make the novel sell. As soon as the writer added sex and dumbed down the plot, it was a huge success. Societal norms forced the writer to write a book he didn't agree with. Now, Shen Qingqiu is in said world being forced to conform to those same norms that the original writer didn't even like. Said original writer is heavily implied to be a gay man forced to write heterosexual porn to pay rent. Shen Qingqiu has to ensure that his points rise by behaving in certain ways, by improving the story, by finding and fixing plot holes, and so on. This isn't too important for most of the novel. What is that his behavior is fixed at major points. Even once he can be OOC, there are certain things that must happen, and Shen Qingqiu must do them because he is the villain. This is the setup that sets the tone for the world. Shen Qingqiu is originally a homebody book nerd who's very much a virgin, and seems to think he's straight, even though his major soliloquies are often focused on Luo Binghe's incredible sexual progress and his heavenly pillar. His favorite female main character is the one who wears a mask over her face and has no sexual content about her in the original story. Whenever he talks about the fan service and bodice ripping that men enjoy, he always describes it as being attractive to men in general, not to himself specifically. He even opens the story by explaining the plot and skipping all the fan service. He couldn't be more closeted if he were living in an actual closet. He very rarely mentions missing home or his family, and it seems clear he didn't leave much of a life behind. If he could spend 20 days consecutively locked up in his house reading without interruption, it's likely his life was a little lonely. And his only real concerns upon entering this world is to live to a peaceful old age on his own. He doesn't pine to return home, he doesn't miss having friends, because it doesn't seem he had any. As long as he has his little house and his books and he's safe, he's basically content. Not happy, but okay with the results. He doesn't aspire to anything more than general physical well-being, not emotional and spiritual fulfillment. That's because such fulfillment was never in his reach. The rules of the world didn't allow for it, so he would take what he could get. And having been reborn into this world, he reacts in much the same way. He'll be happy with what he's given, if only to keep the peace. Arc 1 of the Scum villain story shows us Shen Qingqiu's attempts to survive and fulfill his role. He makes decisions based on omniscient knowledge, he acts based on his role as a strict teacher rather than his own personality, and he attempts to relate to others based on how he believes Shen Qingqiu is supposed to relate to them, rather than how he really feels about them. That leads him to isolate himself by locking his own feelings away, to mislead others by acting one way and feeling another, even if the acts aren't that far from the truth. This happens most with Luo Binghe, and how Shen Qingqiu attempts to be both the distant teacher and the villainous enemy, but at times his own sincere feelings slip through. Having not realized that Binghe is a unique individual and not a fixed fictional character, he does not properly plan for what's going to happen when he's forced to play his role as the villain. It starts from the moment Shen Qingqiu wakes up in the world of Scum villain. Looking around, he quickly realizes he's in a novel scenario, both literally and figuratively, and having already thought about what he'd do if this ever happened to him, he decides to play it cool. He begins acting. At this point, the novel still refers to him as Shen Yuan, but it's only a few pages in when the shift occurs and Shen Yuan disappears behind Shen Qingqiu. And for at least 3 novels, Shen Qingqiu will curtail his personality and behavior to match a dead man's whose corpse he's walking around in. His main focus is avoiding Shen Qingqiu's original fate, having all his limbs cut off and being tortured to death by the vengeful protagonist. He can't change too drastically or too quickly. The system won't allow it, but his very first thought is for Luo Binghe and his safety, in part because he knows his safety is tied to the boy's safety too. Unfortunately, Luo Binghe has already been living on the mountain for some time and he's already been abused. Shen Qingqiu tries giving him some medicine, and in the book gets away with it by behaving like an asshole while he does, saying it's to keep others from talking and spreading rumors about the sect, something the original Shen Qingqiu would care about, but the new Shen Qingqiu doesn't. He cares more about the safety of a child, but he isn't allowed to say it. From the first time they meet, it's clear Shen Qingqiu thinks incredibly highly of Luo Binghe. As we get deeper into the story, it's revealed in more detail. Though Shen Qingqiu complained about the original book's plot holes and fan service constantly, he never complained about the character of Binghe. Through his internal monologue, revealing his true thoughts and not his master persona, he often rages at and makes fun of others, but only has the best to say and think of Binghe. In Shen Qingqiu's eyes, the hero is associated with light and celestial bodies. He's often compared to the sun and stars, or has the light shining out of his eyes, and his first sword is even named Zhen Yang, Righteous Sun. But this reaction, while certainly better than the angry abuse of the original, isn't like that of a person with another person. It's like a superfan meeting their idol. It's a reaction to an aesthetic. He likes the character of Binghe, who represents a certain persona Shen Qingqiu holds in his own mind. He doesn't see the actual person. The first major scene that begins to shift Shen Qingqiu and Luo Binghe's dynamic is the forest bullying scene. Luo Binghe is out chopping wood with his friend Ning Yingying, the cutesy female side character and childhood crush who in the original novel mostly existed to be kidnapped. Mingfan, the bully who has a crush on Yingying, shows up and begins bullying Luo Binghe because Yingying shows him so much favor. Your typical teenage BS. Shen Qingqiu happens to be nearby watching when this all happens, and he recognizes the scene as one from the book. While he knows how it goes, and he knows Luo Binghe, the all-powerful protagonist, will be fine, it becomes hard for him not to intervene. What he knows in his head, that this is a fiction that operates by unsaid rules, goes against what he's experiencing and feeling, that a child is being beaten by a gang of bullies and he's not allowed to stop it. So he does help. Unconsciously, the novel says, a term that will be used often whenever Shen Qingqiu acts on his real feelings rather than performing a practiced role. Using his new fancy powers, he sends a shower of sharp leaves at the bullies, eventually chasing them off. He's punished for this, however, because there is no canonical reason the original Shen Qingqiu would have stepped in. This action is all Shen Yuan. None of this is exactly real to him yet, a fact that is further revealed when Shen Qingqiu spends the next while standing there watching Luo Binghe and Ning Yingying in the woods. He is so dissociated from this life, so wrapped into the idea that it is fiction, a story he's watching play out, he literally stands there and watches it for no reason at all. Once he comes to his senses, he watches the children leave and enters the woods, finding Luo Binghe's lost necklace on the ground. This specific item merits exploring in more detail, as it is heavily tied to the major themes of the book itself. The necklace is a jade Buddhist figure, a guanyin, a female deity tied to motherhood and mercy, a popular goddess of love and affection. She is Luo Binghe's greatest treasure, the last gift he received from his dead mother, and it ties into the themes of motherhood and feminine feeling that are strewn throughout the novel. Remember, this novel is a parody of popular fiction, and popular fiction is skewed towards the dominant classes and cultures, in this case, the masculine. It is a male power fantasy, a stallion novel, as it's described in the book, meaning that the original world of proud immortal Demon Way is based on traditional heterosexual masculine ideas and themes. The main character is meant to be badass and cool, to get all the chicks and never lose a single fight. But Scum Villain is going to show how that ideal is lacking a lot of what makes people human and what makes people happy. In fact, it lacks the feminine side. All the female characters are brain-dead sex fiends. There's no softness or kindness, no emotional fulfillment. What is traditionally feminine is removed from the original work, but Scum Villain's gonna put it all back in. Feminine symbols and concepts are found throughout the novel. Shen Qingqiu himself comments on how he keeps tripping the flag for scenarios that in traditional novels would be played by a woman. Blood and the swallowing of blood is a major plot point throughout the story, and blood has long been associated with femininity. And the true villain of the story is a chauvinist, who uses abuse and coercion to control others, male and female. But we'll get back to these themes later. The next major story beat involves Shen Qingqiu and his gaggle of kids leaving the mountain on their first quest. Before leaving, Shen Qingqiu makes sure his act is on point. But even as he's making sure he's wearing his mask, another scene unfolds that challenges his control. The kids scheme to keep Luo Binghe from having a horse, which means he'll have to walk behind everyone else. At first, Shen Qingqiu struggles with just watching as he's bullied again. Thankfully, he's given the chance to intervene when Ning Yingying begs him to put a stop to it. Since the original Shen Qingqiu's favorite disciple was Yingying, Shen Qingqiu successfully argues with the system that it wouldn't be out of character for him to capitulate to her. Successfully maneuvering around the rules, he invites Luo Binghe to ride in the carriage with him. Here, he catches a glimpse of the young man Luo Binghe will become, and is enraptured enough by the young man to smile. Said smile costs him points. Shen Qingqiu does not smile, but that smile strikes the young Luo Binghe hard. His teacher's never smiled at him before. He's never been nice to him before. What's happening? The act is described as unconscious, once again reflecting how Shen Qingqiu's authentic self sometimes slips through, and when it does, it has a hugely transformative effect on Luo Binghe. This is his baby gay awakening. The side quest they're starting out on is the hunt for the Skinner demon in a nearby city, where multiple women have been murdered in recent weeks, specifically the members of a local rich man's harem. During the first night in town, the kids get to go out and play, but Shen Qingqiu, despite wanting to explore his new world, is forced to stay inside and act in the role of the antisocial original. It's a pretty sad scene, wherein Shen Qingqiu's boredom and loneliness is described in his lack of desire to do anything other than play dead. Eventually, the plot moves forward. Shen Qingqiu figures out what's happening, but not before Ning Yingying is, of course, kidnapped. Luo Binghe runs in, panicking because she's disappeared. Shen Qingqiu and Luo Binghe head out to find her, only for Shen Qingqiu to be taken by surprise, knocked unconscious, and kidnapped himself. Whoops. This is definitely an out-of-character situation. Shen Qingqiu admits it himself when he awakens, half-naked and tied to a pole by the enemy demon, his two students tied up nearby. To be fair, this is his first real fight with a demon, and he's still trying to fit into the role of the ethereal, powerful warrior. But he's effed up good, and now the demon definitely has the upper hand. More importantly, however, Luo Binghe is incredibly taken aback by the whole scenario, specifically the new way he's seeing his master. They survive the fight with some finagling, and Shen Qingqiu manipulates the system to defeat the demon, and the kids are saved. Once again, Shen Qingqiu can't outright explain his behavior or act concerned, so he masks his feelings and talks around them. Binghe is still taken aback by what he interprets as his master actually giving a shit about him for the first time, which is technically true. The scene also includes Shen Qingqiu committing his first murder, a very understated scene that has the man almost gagging. Here we start to see the fiction and reality rubbing against each other as Qingqiu attempts to rationalize away what just happened as fiction, while being unable to ignore the very real, very dead body in front of him. Now that he's completed his first mission, Shen Qingqiu is free to unlock the OOC function. He's not completely free. He has to make sure certain elements of the plot happen, but he can behave more like himself. Still, he's not completely unrestrained. Like anyone else, he's held back by his role, his community's expectations, his job. He's an immortal master of a martial arts sect. He's expected to be an upstanding figure, composed and collected, to dedicate himself to his sect and his people. It's not a role he chose, but at times it seems to be one he enjoys. He likes being seen as intelligent, being looked up to, and he likes being admired and seen as valuable. He's just not a major fan of violence or conflict, which unfortunately comes up far too often. That brings us to the next major scene, after a few years have passed when a contingent of enemy demons invade the mountain. It's been a while since our main characters saw each other, and Shen Qingqiu immediately seeks out Luo Binghe and is settled by seeing his growth. On the other hand, the new female character enters the scene, Xia Hualing, who is scantily clad and a major sexy draw of the original book. Her appearance leads Shen Qingqiu only to consider how impractical her clothing is. Remember, he's very straight. Shen Qingqiu is the only adult around to face the demon invaders, and he's drawn into a 3-on-3 match of his students versus the enemy. He takes one round and has a blast showing off, before being informed by the system that Luo Binghe has to take part, or Shen Qingqiu will suffer the consequences. At this point, Luo Binghe is still just a kid. He's barely been trained, and this demon he's about to face is an ancient warrior. In the original plotline, Shen Qingqiu hated the kid and didn't care what happened to him. But this Shen Qingqiu isn't such an asshole. He doesn't want Luo Binghe to suffer or die. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a choice, but he does have the knowledge of how the fight went the first time. He knows that Shen Qingqiu's attempt to get rid of Luo Binghe fails, because the kid pulls through and wins. Knowing he's fated to win, he says as much out loud, and Binghe, shocked to hear his teacher's insistent faith in him, is shaken to his soul. From his perspective, it's pure faith from a teacher he didn't think liked him very much. From Shen Qingqiu's perspective, it's just facts. Luo Binghe will be the winner, he's the protagonist, he can't lose. Yet that fact isn't far from faith either. Shen Qingqiu has faith in Binghe as the protagonist, and genuinely believes he can and will overcome anything. After Binghe wins and the conflict is over, the losing demon attempts to take advantage of everyone's distraction to avenge himself on the kid attacking his back. Shen Qingqiu obviously isn't going to allow that, and his first attempt at defending him is very in character for the immortal teacher. He acts cool and aloof. But the demon still doesn't back down, reaching out with his poisoned armor to try and attack the kid. The poison only works on humans, not demons, and Luo Binghe is half demon. Shen Qingqiu knows this, and yet, just like the bullying scene, despite knowing everything will be fine, he can't stand back and watch the kid be hurt. The scene describes him as acting subconsciously, and his instinctive action is protect Binghe. The protection injures and permanently disables Shen Qingqiu, an act that completely rewrites Binghe's thoughts and feelings about the man. Before, he was conflicted, at times in awe of his teacher, at times angered or confused by his behavior. Now he's completely forgotten the past because of what his teacher did for him. But even as he does it, Shen Qingqiu has not completely abandoned his act, nor his perspective that this is all essentially a game. As he passes out on the battlefield, he speaks to Binghe, hoping to farm points by influencing him. Shen Qingqiu is at war with himself. His instinctive, unconscious mind sees and reacts to this world as if it were real, but consciously, at his most self-aware, he still interprets it all as a show, a game he's playing, and the people around him are actors. He's meant to play a role, and he still doesn't see how his version of said role, one that protects, that is sincere in quiet ways, that behaves as if Binghe is important to him, is dramatically changing how Binghe feels and acts in this world, what he values and who he values. You can see that Shen Qingqiu still thinks of Binghe as a character, not a person, by how he addresses him. In his internal monologue, Shen Qingqiu calls him Bingge, with the suffix being a Chinese term that refers to brothers. In this story, Binghe is a term that refers to the original Luo Binghe in the novel Shen Qingqiu read, and he uses Binghe to refer to that character, first on page 33 when discussing Binghe's dark charm in the original novel. Then, after Shen Qingqiu was injured to protect Binghe, his student kneels at his side, shocked at what's happened, and Shen Qingqiu takes the chance to lift his arm and pat Binghe's head like he'd always wanted to. It appears again in the scene after the invasion, when Luo Binghe, the person, tells his master he's incredibly grateful for what he's done, and he now understands why his teacher was so strict. Shen Qingqiu is shocked, asking in his head, "What do you understand, Binghe?" To him, this is still a character, but it's a character he's incredibly fond of, even if he hasn't completely realized the character is a fully realized human being. That's why, as Shen Qingqiu passes out after defending Binghe, he thinks for a moment Binghe is crying, but that he must have been seeing things, because in the book, Binghe never cried. After Shen Qingqiu wakes up and he and Binghe have a moment, Shen Qingqiu questions the system about his restrictions. Is he really required to betray Binghe? Is there no other way? He's informed that he must still betray him, revealing that Shen Qingqiu may not yet see this as the real world, but he's at least invested in bettering it, and feels uneasy about hurting the boy. Ultimately, Shen Qingqiu decides it's necessary anyway. If the hero isn't betrayed and doesn't go on his vengeance quest, he won't become the almighty, all-powerful demon lord. And if he doesn't do that, what's the point? Where's the satisfaction, he asks. This ties back into those satisfaction points. The idea that this world exists to satisfy the desires and fantasies of a certain dominant culture. Who cares what Binghe the person wants? It's more important he be traumatized and bullied into becoming a murderous, vengeful horndog monster, for the sake of all those porn readers back home. Here we see how the narrative is pulling together its themes, how Shen Qingqiu has fallen into acting as a self-defense mechanism, ignoring his own dissatisfaction and the hints that those around him are real people. They can't be real, because that would mean facing the fact he's going to have to hurt some of them, and it's easier if this is all pretend. Sticking to the role ensures that the badassery and the satisfaction of the story remains. It's more important that people fit into the roles that the quote system, or hypermasculine society, presses on them rather than being safe and happy. Of course, that's not really the case, and we quickly see how continuing to try and stick to those roles damages both Shen Qingqiu and Luo Binghe, their relationship with each other, and the world around them. In the Dream Realm sequence, where Shen Qingqiu and Binghe face a dream demon together, Shen Qingqiu takes on the female role, or the maiden's role as he puts it. In the original story, Binghe's nightmare draws in his closest confidant, Ning Yingying. In this world, no one matters more to him than Shen Qingqiu. During the dream sequence, we meet Binghe's mother and see a memory of her patting him on the head, a behavior Shen Qingqiu will indulge in constantly, and which associates him with the one person that was ever kind to Binghe, his mom. During the sequence, Shen Qingqiu is again injured to protect Binghe. After he is, Binghe once again regrets having hurt his teacher, while Shen Qingqiu expresses his innermost feelings in telling Binghe that's the point. He's the teacher, he's meant to defend him. But no one's ever done that for Binghe, and it leaves him distraught. It's here in the dream realm that another major theme of the story begins to coalesce. The idea of strength. What is strength? What is it for? In the original story, strength was badassery, the power and ability to coolly and deftly defeat everyone, and only the main character was capable of it. It began from the desire to protect Ning Yingying, his first of many loves, tying strength into heterosexual potency, leading to an enormous harem of more than 600 women. This time, it's Shen Qingqiu, the male teacher, who defends Binghe and inspires the boy's desire to be strong and protect others. Because it's his teacher, and Shen Qingqiu recognizes that the scene happening before him is the inspirational one, he has mixed feelings about it. He's conflicted about always falling into the female role, but in the dream scene, after getting over his initial shock, Shen Qingqiu reacts more authentically as himself rather than a reader of the book. This is a kid, and he's the teacher meant to protect him, so he tells him that it's okay not to be strong, that he'll stay by his side and protect him. He also, quote, selfishly pats Binghe's head again, an act he's becoming very fond of. We can see he's taking on the mother role, constantly put in female roles, acting as the teacher and protector, being compared to Binghe's deceased mom. And in this scene, he lets Binghe know a feminine truth. It's okay to need other people, to need protection from other people. Only hyper-masculine badasses have to win every battle alone every time. And this is the first time Binghe's been told that's not who he has to be. In fact, Shen Qingqiu has the thought that maybe it'd be better if Binghe stayed like this, describing him as a white lotus. Lotuses are flowers that are incredibly important in Buddhism. They are symbols of enlightenment. The flower, which is rooted in the dirty, muddy ground, floats on the surface of the pure water. The white lotus is a symbol of a pure, innocent child, and Shen Qingqiu thinks maybe it would be better if Binghe stayed like he was, happy, innocent, and carefree, rather than becoming the tormented Black Lotus, the hypermasculine anti-hero of the original novel. Unfortunately, the sweet scene comes to an end, and the dream sequence ultimately ends with Shen Qingqiu entering his own nightmare, wherein he suffers the fate of the original Shen Qingqiu, tortured at the hands of the original Luo Binghe. He wakes up and immediately retches, having just experienced what it was to have all his limbs and tongue removed. He's so upset by it, he reflexively pushes the child Luo Binghe away when he runs into the room to check on him. This plants a seed of fear in Shen Qingqiu, fear that Binghe will become that hypermasculine figure, capable of torture, and turn that violence on Shen Qingqiu. But the teacher will quickly return to his act. He takes refuge from his fear in the role he's meant to play, a pattern that will repeat again and again. Now let's skim through some story. We're about to have another time jump as Binghe gets older while studying under Shen Qingqiu. There's a short scene in which Binghe hugs his teacher for the first time, which is described as the first time in his life that anyone had ever full-body embraced Shen Qingqiu. Holy shit. The two live and study together, with Binghe making his teacher all his meals, and purposefully messing up his techniques during training so he can be caught by Shen Qingqiu. Eventually, Shen Qingqiu realizes he's not taking it seriously and figures, he's the protagonist, right? He'll be fine. So they stop heavy focus on training and just take it day by day, enjoying life. Too bad the system has to show up and fuck everything up. When the fated moment for Shen Qingqiu's betrayal comes. The days leading up to the event, Shen Qingqiu struggles with what he must do, before finally addressing his student. He asks him about strength, about what he's willing to do for it, and in a roundabout way asking whether being the most powerful is what Binghe wants. Shen Qingqiu feels guilty. For the last few years, Binghe really hasn't been training to be the best. He's been cooking and cleaning, taking on feminine roles, serving his master almost as a good wife, which Shen Qingqiu sometimes thinks of as a description for his behavior. Surely the great Luo Binghe is meant for more than this, is meant to be that hyper-masculine badass and not Shen Qingqiu's cute little wife. Unfortunately, Shen Qingqiu didn't ask his question clearly enough. Binghe says yes, because he wants to be powerful enough to protect the people and things that are important to him. He means Shen Qingqiu, without realizing his answer reads differently to his teacher. Shen Qingqiu hears the desire for conquest and battle, to be that badass from the original story. But while he's convinced that he must betray Binghe to inspire his rise to power, he's still not happy about it. He attempts to brainwash himself, in the words of the book, but it doesn't relieve the pain at all. So the fated betrayal eventually arrives. Luo Binghe's demon blood is revealed, and Shen Qingqiu is forced to follow the script, to act viciously to his student, and push him into the endless abyss. In the aftermath, he is distraught, out of his mind with grief. He stops eating, and often accidentally calls out for Binghe, having forgotten he's no longer there. He grieves for Binghe as if he was a real person, for the first time realizing on some level how much he cared for him. He's still conflicted, and not entirely self-aware, but Shen Qingqiu at the very least acknowledges the feelings he had by mourning the relationship he lost. He may never have consciously been aware of it, but Binghe was more than a character to him. The pain becomes clear to others, including Shang Qinghua, another peak lord and transmigrator that Shen Qingqiu meets after Binghe's loss. Realizing how much Qingqiu is mourning, Qinghua asks him how he sees Binghe. The question reminds Shen Qingqiu of young girls gossiping at a sleepover, striking at his pride and ruffling his feathers. He won't answer, but the truth is clear. He does care about Binghe as a real person, but he hasn't fully acknowledged that yet. The very last pages of the first book close on Shen Qingqiu refusing to answer the question. For all that the story is about Binghe and his will-he-won't-he journey to hyper-masculine badassery, it's also about the internalized anti-feminine feelings Shen Qingqiu has. It's clear in his inner monologues and the way he composes himself. Not that he dislikes women in some way, but that he's been conditioned to see different roles in different ways, to believe they are meant to behave differently. Whenever it's implied he could be slipping into a feminine role or taking on feminine features, he reacts with shock or disagreement, even when it's clearly the case. Harshly restrictive gender roles have taught him to hide how he feels, to keep his emotions close, and the only reason he was less restrictive with Binghe is because he was a child. The roles of teacher and student allowed him more leeway to be kind and gentle, and this was encouraged when Binghe reacted so well to it. But for the most part, Shen Qingqiu shies away from sharing how he really feels, from expressing his emotions, or from needing the help of others, especially the child Binghe. Book 1 comes to a close and leads into Book 2, where a shift will come in the main character's dynamics. Shen Qingqiu will continue using his act and his mask to survive, particularly when Luo Binghe appears, and he will take refuge in his performance when he's afraid, which is often. But the new dynamic comes from Luo Binghe's side, who will himself begin his own act. He's hurt, and he's angry, and he's unwilling to trust his teacher even if he still cares for him. This leads him to manipulate others, to lie and keep things secret, which leads to misunderstandings and greater problems arising between them. Both characters are now putting on an act, and it is getting harder and harder for them to understand each other. Book 2 opens with a new side plot. There's a strange plague ravaging a nearby town, and Shen Qingqiu, Liu Qingge, and the doctor Mu Qingfang head out to assist. It is during the investigation of the plague that Shen Qingqiu is first reunited with his former disciple Luo Binghe. Luo Binghe is not supposed to be here. Taken aback, Shen Qingqiu stares in shock, taking in the new appearance of his student, who is so handsome he could grace the cover of a romance novel, no matter the angle. He's straight, remember guys, he's totally straight. Once again, Shen Qingqiu refers to Luo Binghe as Binghe, his term for the character. Time apart and his reluctant acceptance of the role of villain have put Shen Qingqiu back in the mindset of acting as a character. This is just a play, and they are all taking on parts. He is very afraid that the part Luo Binghe is playing now is the vengeful mastermind, manipulating and scheming his way into power. Binghe sees his teacher and still calls him Shizun, a Chinese term for teacher. His expression is tender and kind. That immediately terrifies Shen Qingqiu, because he thinks that Binghe is the one acting now, and he's not entirely wrong. The teacher gathers his composure and forces himself to play the opposing role, even as he is about to burst into tears. Luo Binghe also appears perfectly unflappable, the both of them wearing masks to keep from showing how hurt and afraid they are. Because Binghe isn't here to get revenge. He still loves his teacher, much more than Shen Qingqiu realizes. Shen Qingqiu even sees it for just a moment during the conversation, almost believing that the individual before his eyes was still that bleeding, grass-loving little lamb he had raised. He can't fully bring himself to believe it, and has to consider it an act. The masks are on, and they are staying, at least for now. Shen Qingqiu avoids Binghe, feeling the man must mean him ill, and that he wouldn't even be wrong to do so. But that doesn't mean he's not terrified and eager to escape possible harm, and so reacts to Binghe as if he's a threat. And when the man appears to visit him in the middle of the night, he immediately leaps out of his window and flees for his life. He doesn't get far, of course. Luo Binghe immediately grows angry. He grabs his teacher and pins him, forcing him to listen to his tirade. He wants answers, and Shen Qingqiu is reluctant to give any, because what can he say? He still thinks Luo Binghe is lying about his intentions, and that this is going to end with violence, so he continues his cool, composed poser act. He refuses to show how he's really feeling, hiding behind a mask. The next major plot point is the turning point for the whole story, when Shen Qingqiu will begin to fall from grace and be seen as a villain in the public eye. It's a setup, and to Shen Qingqiu it seems obvious that Luo Binghe is behind it. He's not, but Binghe doesn't tell him so, and continues to let him be framed. One is angry and keeping his distance, the other is afraid and keeping his distance, so neither of them are communicating and realizing there's a third figure manipulating things in the background. Shen Qingqiu is imprisoned and speaks with Luo Binghe again in jail. Binghe interrupts a scene in which another character attempts to torture his teacher, and he's infuriated. Shen Qingqiu misunderstands it, of course, and the scene goes as you'd expect. More misunderstandings and more speaking at cross purposes. At one point, the system tries to give Shen Qingqiu a hand. It gives him a prompt and 3 dialogue choices. One of the answers is the truth, how Shen Qingqiu really feels, an emotional, revealing response. One of the answers is a cruel, villainous, fake quote, The third choice is silence. Shen Qingqiu, a emotionally repressed idiot, refuses to say how he really feels, too horrified and embarrassed at the very idea. Shen Qingqiu eventually escapes the prison and flees for his life. On his way to anywhere but here, he falls asleep. And of course, Luo Binghe finds him in the dream realm. They have a small face-off, but most importantly, the story introduces a new, majorly important object, Shen Mo, Luo Binghe's sword, which he found in the Endless Abyss. Shen Mo is a very important metaphor. It's a dangerous demonic sword which feeds on its user. It makes Luo Binghe more emotionally and physically unstable, and it damages his mind. He found it in the Abyss after being betrayed by his teacher, and its name is translated as Heart Demon. Heart demons are a common genre trope in Chinese wuxia and xianxia. The idea behind them is essentially like mental illness for the soul. When the character has a heart demon, it's like a scar on their psyche that keeps their martial arts or magical powers from progressing. Different stories handle them differently, and in this case, it's not a literal heart demon, but a sword named Heart Demon that takes on the role. Luo Binghe almost literally obtained heart demons from falling into the abyss. The trauma damaged his heart and mind, and the longer it goes unaddressed, the more mentally and physically ill he grows. Shen Qingqiu was his beloved teacher who betrayed him, leading Binghe to believe the one person who loved him now hates him and wants him dead. Here we see the story tying suffering and illness to badassery. Sure, Luo Binghe survived the abyss. He escaped with unlocked demonic powers and a super powerful sword, but what was the cost? And was the price worth it? Luo Binghe and Shen Qingqiu show down again in Jinlan City. At this point, Shen Qingqiu realizes things have gone very wrong. The original Luo Binghe had a will of steel that allowed him to rein in and control the Shen Mo sword. His Luo Binghe hasn't learned to control it yet. Shen Qingqiu begins to realize he's done something very wrong, as Binghe tells him how he really feels. He asks his teacher if he's strong enough now. That's what he was supposed to become, right? Strong? While in the abyss, all he could think about was his teacher asking himself why someone who loved him had betrayed him. His honest sorrow and pain touches Shen Qingqiu, who feels truly guilty about being forced to betray him. Unable to control the sword, Luo Binghe is in danger of hurting himself and everyone around him, when Shen Qingqiu sacrifices himself to save them. The scene is a parallel of their previous parting, when Luo Binghe's sword was broken and he fell from a cliff into the abyss. This time, it's Qingqiu's sword that breaks, and he falls from the roof of the building. Shen Qingqiu thinks of it as repayment for the way he hurt Binghe before. In his mind, he tells Binghe to think of it as me doing one good thing at the end. Even now, this is a scene he is painting in his mind. The villain's sacrificial redemption, allowing the hero to move on with his life and forgive his teacher. But Luo Binghe is devastated. The teacher that he thought hated him just died to save him. Others arrive on the scene and berate him, revealing how Shen Qingqiu had mourned Binghe, everything he'd done in the years since they parted. The chapter ends with the tragic reveal of how Binghe really feels. He cries while holding Shen Qingqiu's body in his arms. In the next chapter, we are transported to the division between the human and demon realms. 5 years have passed. Luo Binghe is at war with the cultivators. In the borderlands, Shen Qingqiu wakes up in his new backup body, all part of a plan he hatched years before to ensure that once his role as the villain was done, he could escape and have a life all his own. He's thrilled to be back and eager to avoid notice from anyone from his past life. We see the name Shen Yuan appear again for the first time in many chapters, as his new body is described as being similar to his original one as Shen Yuan. He's no longer the immortal master of Qingjing Peak, but he is still hiding who he is and trying to avoid notice. He's thinking of Luo Binghe a lot, despite trying not to be involved in the plot again. He even has a long inner monologue about the man's penis, giving it a nickname, the Heavenly Pillar, and then laughing at himself, and then getting angry at himself for mocking the great master protagonist. Binghe is back to being a character in a role in a story that Shen Qingqiu no longer feels he's part of. Still, when he hears there's a demon nearby kidnapping people, he immediately decides to figure out if it's Binghe. He does so by asking if a good-looking young man was behind it. Not just good-looking, but very good-looking, especially good-looking. That closet door is about to fall off its hinges. Investigating the kidnapping, Shen Qingqiu learns it is in fact Luo Binghe's doing, in a roundabout way. His Shinmo sword is still giving him problems. His demon and human sides are at war, and his heart demons are keeping him imbalanced. To avoid dying, he's been using humans as part of a ritual to get rid of the extra energy, and Shen Qingqiu finds himself taken as a hostage for just such a ritual. The two meet once again, and Shen Qingqiu notices the changes in his former student. Where he was once warm like sunlight, he is now glacier cold. A play on his last name, which means glacier. Watching from afar, he's confused at how bad off Binghe seems to be. By the original story's arc, he should have had control of his powers by now. Shen Qingqiu still can't separate the fiction from the reality in front of him. He doesn't understand Binghe's lack of control. He quickly learns of another big change. None of the female characters who were love interests and members of Binghe's harem have entered his harem. Binghe doesn't seem to have a single love interest at all. Another dream sequence begins soon after, a memory of Binghe when he was still a young student. It shows the scene in which Shen Qingqiu decides to stop heavily training Binghe because the boy was not taking it seriously. A memory that Binghe clearly values since this is his dream. It shows what Binghe really cares about. He was willing to ignore training in proper sword forms just for the chance to trip and fall into his teacher's embrace. Seeking physical affection and reassurance. What he wanted was love, not training. Watching this memory, the modern Shen Qingqiu has a new thought. Did he occupy a better place in Luo Binghe's heart than he thought? Yeah, no duh. Shen Qingqiu has been evaluating these relationships through the lens of the original book. Ning Yingying was Luo Binghe's closest friend in the original, so he assumes she must still be his closest friend, despite the fact that his teacher's behavior toward him changed so drastically. For the first time in many years, an adult took care of his physical and emotional health, put his safety first, valued his happiness, and protected him from others. Of course Shen Qingqiu is important to him. In the dream realm, the adult Luo Binghe shows up, and so begins a game of scene within a scene. Shen Qingqiu realizes this is the real Luo Binghe, and acts as if he, Shen Qingqiu, is just part of the dream. Luo Binghe, a master dreamweaver, knows this is his real teacher, and has already put together the truth that Shen Qingqiu was reborn, but pretends he doesn't know. He pretends that he thinks Shen Qingqiu is just part of the dream, because he's desperate to show his feelings, to receive that affection he's been craving for years. Shen Qingqiu pats Luo Binghe on the head, an act he loves doing but apparently was never able to do to anyone before. It was a forbidden act, which only made him want to do it more. But most grown adults don't want to be touched, so no one would let him. Put this together with his earlier first hug from anyone coming from Binghe, and it's clear that Binghe is not the only one starved for physical and emotional affection. Shen Qingqiu has wanted to give and receive it and had no one to share it with. It is also during this scene that Luo Binghe reveals his true feelings, his romantic feelings. He kisses Shen Qingqiu, an act that is actually described as chomping on his lips, because this Luo Binghe is not a suave lady killer, but an inexperienced virgin who has never done anything. This act shocks Shen Qingqiu, whose entire worldview was built on the idea that Luo Binghe was the ultimate ladies' man, and that Shen Qingqiu himself was staunchly straight. He's very wrong about most things. The kiss and the way it challenges Shen Qingqiu's default worldview scares him into fleeing once again. Quite a lot of drama unfolds that leads to Shen Qingqiu realizing more and more that Luo Binghe does honestly love him. He sees the evidence all around. The man kept his sword, tried to resurrect him back into his body. He's made Shen Qingqiu his entire personality, the way only a desperately mentally ill gay trauma victim could. The more Shen Qingqiu sees of Luo Binghe's sufferings and his feelings for his teacher, the more he aches for him. Things that other people would see as giant red flags become deeply moving, like the sight of Luo Binghe devastated over the loss of Shen Qingqiu's corpse. And even as Shen Qingqiu tries to not give hope to Luo Binghe, his unconscious heart and mind are definitely on a different wavelength, and he is reacting to Luo Binghe as if the man is the only important thing in the world. Shen Qingqiu realizes that Luo Binghe suffered his assumptions all this time. He's assumed he knew what would happen and that he knew who Luo Binghe was, all based on plot points and story tropes. He acted based on the character, not the person before him. Finally, he starts to see Luo Binghe as himself. It's no mistake the realization comes on the heels of recognizing Binghe's sexuality and his feelings for his teacher. It's a direct correlation. The idea that people are not just roles to play, are not just types to fit in boxes, goes with the idea that some people are in fact homosexual. But of course, throughout all these scenes, Luo Binghe is still keeping secrets. He knows Shen Qingqiu in this new body is his teacher, but he hasn't said. Shen Qingqiu is really unhappy when he realizes Luo Binghe was manipulating him, because it puts everything into question, his supposed feelings included, and that itself is heavily upsetting, because his revelations about this world and the roles people play in it were tied to Luo Binghe being a different person than he thought. But if he really is that two-faced manipulative anti-hero, what does that mean? Still, Shen Qingqiu admits he's wronged Binghe in the past and says he won't run away anymore. Binghe isn't really ready to believe him. They leave together to go to his demon palace, and so ends Book 2. Book 3 puts us in a totally new scenario. Both characters have been reborn and reunited. They've each hurt and betrayed each other, lied to and manipulated each other, but they also both love and care for each other. And the problem now is to figure out how to stop acting, to pull back the masks and be sincere with one another. Luo Binghe takes Shen Qingqiu to his demon palace, where he places him in a room designed to look like their old house from his childhood. It infuriates Shen Qingqiu. It's as if Luo Binghe is trying to arrange them all as characters on a stage. He can't be sure what Luo Binghe really means, and that's exactly how Binghe felt after Shen Qingqiu betrayed him. At times loving him, at times running away and fearing him. Which exactly is real? Neither person can understand the other right now, and Shen Qingqiu is slowly going to realize how he was the first to start this game of masks. The two of them bicker back and forth for a while before Luo Binghe brings the conversation around to strength. He reminds Shen Qingqiu of the question he once asked. Shen Qingqiu informs him that strength is meant to protect. Luo Binghe insists it is to keep the people they want, referring of course to Shen Qingqiu. As long as they aren't separated, he's happy, even if it means Shen Qingqiu hates him. Here we see a glimpse of the dark side of strength and the hyper-masculine and what Binghe could become. He's keeping Shen Qingqiu as his prisoner against his will. These parallels are going to be important when we meet the real bad guy of the novel. Luo Binghe leaves Shen Qingqiu alone in his room after Shen Qingqiu asks to never see him again. For a while, he has some peace. It's almost the life he always wanted. Physically safe and provided for, with room and board and books to read, and somehow it's not as fulfilling as he thought it would be. He's known what it is to have someone to love and care for now, and he can't pretend he doesn't care about Binghe. Eventually, Binghe does check in on him again. They have another argument, and an unfortunate coincidence leads Shen Qingqiu to die again in Binghe's arms. He's not actually dead. Someone has summoned his soul back to his original body. He wakes up in the Holy Mausoleum, a holy demon locale and the focus of the next major plot point. Here he meets the man who resurrected him. Lo and behold, it's none other than Luo Binghe's long-lost father. Tianlang Jun. He's trying to lure Luo Binghe to the mausoleum, which is why he summoned Shen Qingqiu. And of course, the plan works. Binghe shows up to save him, and both of them are forced to fight alongside one another and defend each other. Binghe is badly injured to the point of passing out. This leads to a long section in which Shen Qingqiu is forced to defend them both. He's feeling especially fond and sympathetic for the man. Binghe has gone to incredible lengths to try and protect Shen Qingqiu, to the point of being near death. His suffering for Shen Qingqiu's sake does more to convince the man of his sincerity than words ever could, and Shen Qingqiu returns the favor by suffering terribly to get them both out of the mausoleum. We begin to see how Shen Qingqiu's way of thinking of Binghe is truly changing, as his inner monologue references to Binghe are different. He's no longer the protagonist or Binghe. Now he's this child, implying his relationship to his teacher, his youth and inexperience, and his humanity. Shen Qingqiu is back to feeling like he did as a teacher years before, that this is his child he must protect. He's still confused and conflicted about the relationship, but admits they are student and master, and he wants Binghe to be safe. During the time when Binghe is asleep, an incredibly ridiculous scene takes place. Shen Qingqiu actually touches the heavenly pillar. He's completely taken aback and shocked by it, and his first thought is guilt that he got the protagonist aroused. Should he help him? Isn't it pitiful for the great protagonist's great protagonist to be left like this? The self-proclaimed straight man touched an erect penis, and his first worry was how to get that penis to get off, and if it was his responsibility to do so. This enormous gay idiot still thinks he's straight, even though his reaction to Binghe's erection is that in these circumstances he's not allowed to help. So in other circumstances you could? Why are you so sad about the untouched erection of a guy? No straight man is so disappointed that another man didn't get off. It's during this time that we meet the Old Palace Master, a small side character who appeared chapters and chapters earlier and vanished. He's here for a very important reveal. He was behind all those misunderstandings back in Book 2, which led to Binghe and Qingqiu's first reunion going so badly. Old Palace Master wanted Luo Binghe to stop caring about Shen Qingqiu, because he wanted Luo Binghe to stay with him, to belong to him. Turns out, Binghe's mom was once a member of the Palace Master's sect, and he'd been completely obsessed with her too, perversely obsessed, as is made very clear at the way he drools after Binghe when complimenting how similar he appears to his mother. The woman was eventually killed due to the Palace Master's interfering. The Old Palace Master is one of the major behind-the-scenes figures that is the cause of so much of the story's drama, an old, lecherous man in a position of power who abused his authority to perv on and control the men and women who worked beneath him. Shen Qingqiu is finally able to defeat him and move forward, and one of the obstacles in their way is finally gone, and along with it, much of Shen Qingqiu's suspicions. He now has answers for many of his questions, and it turns out Binghe really was innocent all along. Shen Qingqiu is realizing he wronged Binghe more than he knew. When Luo Binghe awakes, he's alone because Shen Qingqiu set him down to go face the enemy. He returns to find Binghe awake and angry, thinking he's been abandoned. His reaction to that anger is complete apathy. He's just exhausted, and his typical defense against such things is a cold mask. Binghe, thankfully, sees through him this one time. He notices the tears in his eyes, then he sees the blood-soaked clothes, the injuries. He asks if this was all for him, and Shen Qingqiu can't say anything. In his mind, he thinks, if not for Binghe, then for who? But he can't say it. He's embarrassed. He denies his tears, trying to hide behind a mask again. But Binghe saw the truth for an instant, and the two of them are on better ground for now. They escape the Holy Mausoleum together, only for Tianlang Jun to catch up with them outside and take Shen Qingqiu hostage. Shen Qingqiu insists he'll kill himself before he allows himself to be taken captive, because his least favorite characters were those who only existed to be used as bait or hostages. those female characters, because in traditional novels, they always are, infuriated him. And here we see how some of his anti-feminine feeling is tied into how traditional society allows femininity to be seen. Ultimately, Tianlong Jun demands Luo Binghe hand over his sword, Shinmo. And Binghe just does it, doesn't even argue. The sword that was his most powerful possession, which defined his rise to power in the original novel, is tossed aside like garbage the moment Shen Qingqiu's life is in danger. The man is shocked, and unfortunately, Tianlong Jun tricked them, taking the sword and the teacher. There's some more action, some conversation, some revealing history of Luo Binghe's father, but for our purposes, the most important part is a conversation Shen Qingqiu has with another character, a servant of Tianlong Jun, who is trying to forcibly capture and keep Shen Qingqiu to protect him. This character, Juji Long, feels indebted to Shen Qingqiu and is trying to pay back that debt. In doing so, he's done a lot of bad things that Shen Qingqiu does not agree with. Juji Long doesn't understand, so Shen Qingqiu clarifies for him. His idea of treating him well isn't right. This is the heart of the hyper-masculine critique of this story. Strength of the traditionally masculine kind that warriors like Binghe are attempting to achieve can be used to evil purposes. Without the balance of emotional well-being, with feelings that are associated with the feminine, strength can be turned to perversion and oppression. Binghe and Shen Qingqiu are eventually reunited and escape his father's grasp. The final conflict is coming around. Tianlong Jun plans to use Shinmo to fuse the demon and human realms together, an incredibly bad idea that Shen Qingqiu plans to stop. He and Binghe head off to rally the humans to fight back. None of the humans trust Binghe, but Shen Qingqiu decides he's going to trust him and worry about the outcome later. All these bad events have come from his believing he knew what Binghe was doing or going to do, and being totally wrong. So now he's going to listen to Binghe and trust him, and hope it turns out for the best. Unfortunately, it doesn't. Binghe is still acting. He's being his authentic self, but he's keeping emotions hidden. Specifically his fear, his self-loathing, his jealousy. He's afraid that Shen Qingqiu is only with him to protect others, that Shen Qingqiu prefers everyone else to him, that his teacher secretly would rather be anywhere else. It seems as if Shen Qingqiu's actions reaffirm that, because Binghe begins to do what Shen Qingqiu did in the first book, assuming he knows why Shen Qingqiu does things. When Qingqiu offhandedly affirmed to his friends he'd return to his job after the chaos was over, Binghe hears Shen Qingqiu plans to leave him. When Shen Qingqiu tells Binghe to flee a dangerous scene while Qingqiu stays behind, he thinks he's being abandoned again. When they have the final showdown with Binghe's dad, he's easily defeated. That's when Binghe reveals the truth. He's not going to stop the fusion of the demon and human worlds, because if the two worlds are one, Shen Qingqiu can't leave him again. He's terrified that given the choice between Luo Binghe and anyone else, Shen Qingqiu will choose someone else, so he's going to take the choice away. That is hyper-masculine thinking at hand. Fear of loneliness, self-loathing, the power going to your head, driving you to claim, to keep, for fear of losing. And it's exasperated by years of misunderstandings, abusive behavior, unhealthy coping mechanisms, and a sword that literally feeds off of and worsens mental illness. Binghe is not doing well. Shen Qingqiu realizes suddenly that the boy he thought was recovering well was actually slapping a band-aid on his traumas and pretending. And Shen Qingqiu is very much part of the reason those traumas have gotten so bad. Shen Qingqiu and Luo Binghe can no longer pretend. Shen Qingqiu knows now what he really wants. He wants Luo Binghe. He loves him. And at this moment, he's realized that all his masks, his cool, aloof behavior, keeping his feelings close to his chest, have badly hurt someone he loves. Luo Binghe, half out of his mind and about to die, can only be saved by the classic trope of healing sex. Traditional Taoism has some sexual strains and some theories about male and female energy and how they can be balanced out in sex. And those ideas have entered into the wuxia and zhanxia genres as quite literally life-saving sex. Luo Binghe needs his male and female energies balanced out. So Shen Qingqiu lays down to take it like a man and save his life. The final battle is not a battle. It's not a badass fight. It's human connection. Granted, it's a very, very bad connection. Both these virgins are crying, there's absolutely no preparation, and the scene ends with no one enjoying it because these idiots still haven't really figured each other out. But in the midst of the scene, Shen Qingqiu returns the lost jade pendant to Luo Binghe. Remember that item he got in the first chapter ages ago? The lost necklace that once belonged to Binghe's mother. The pendant that depicts a Buddhist goddess of motherhood given in the midst of sex from Shen Qingqiu, who is currently absorbing the unbalanced yin, or female energy, to save Binghe's life. He's gone from taking the female role to taking the female role to absorb the female energy, while handing over a female symbol that makes Luo Binghe wake up from his crazed state. They save the world. They both pass out and fall into the Luo River, the same river Binghe is named for. They awaken and Shen Qingqiu immediately looks for Binghe, wanting nothing more than to see him. He doesn't hold on to his aloof mask before all his friends. In fact, it says he didn't even bother. Unable to keep his face still, he let out a stifled laugh. He jumps out of bed, surprising everyone, and runs from the room. No care for his graceful demeanor or carefully cultivated appearance. He just wants to see Binghe, and this for the first time is Shen Yuan, as Shen Qingqiu, but acting very much as himself. We see him confirm it in a conversation immediately after, with Yu Qingyan, Shen Qingqiu's oldest friend. Shen Qingqiu refuses to allow the man to call him by his old nickname, because he knows Yu Qingyan is talking to the deceased man, the Shen Qingqiu who is gone. He's not that man, and he will never pretend to be again. He's finally realized he really does love Binghe, exactly as he is right now, not as the character he thought he would be or the person he pretended to be. And he's also happier showing his own emotions too, taking off his own masks. Binghe is so overwhelmed by his emotions he's teary-eyed. Binghe isn't welcome at the martial arts sect given their history, so Shen Qingqiu says, "Let's leave." He says he'll go wherever Binghe wants to go, purposefully not lowering his voice so everyone can hear, because he's not ashamed, he's not embarrassed, and he's no longer afraid. He loves Luo Binghe, and he wants everyone, especially Binghe, to know it. On their way down the mountain, Binghe really cries, and Shen Qingqiu thinks it's a good thing and lets him cry. It's a long way from his shock and disbelief that the protagonist would ever cry, that characters are supposed to be badass and never feel anything. The story ends proclaiming that while the novel had finished, the story had yet to end. Scum Villain is the story of how repression damages relationships and people, how trying to fit the mold that society or your job or martial arts sects place on you isn't going to make you better or stronger or happier, that sometimes trauma is just trauma and not fuel for your revenge quest, and being a badass hypermasculine harem-collecting protagonist isn't actually all that good for you. It's far better to have people you love, a safe place to call home, and an open and honest relationship with the ones you love most. That's what really made Luo Binghe the strongest one of all, and Shen Qingqiu, the man who went from being satisfied being alone to being happy with another person, did so by opening his heart, abandoning his masks, and accepting his truth. Scum Villain, and novels like it, present powerful metaphors for how masking identities leads to suffering and pain on a personal and societal scale. And it shows how love, honest, pure, gay or straight, is the real power behind the greatest of heroes.